to the war in Ukraine now, where Russian troops have made it to the centre of the port city of Kherson and, according to Moscow's version of events, may even have captured that city. If true, Kherson and its population of 250,000 people would represent the first major urban centre to have fallen under Russian control in this week-long war so far. Kharkiv is still under attack and explosions are being reported in the centre of the capital, Kyiv, which is still being stiffly defended by Ukrainian forces. So that's the latest broad brush overview. But retired Australian Major General Mick Ryan joins us now in the studio for some analysis of exactly where we're at the 1 week mark. Welcome, Mick. The shift into urban fighting that we just briefly summarised there, what does that carry with it for both sides? Let's start with the Russians. Are they good at it? Will they have to move to new and more desperate tactics?
The Russians have a lot of experience at it, all the way back to the Second World War. I can't say they've always demonstrated great capacity for it. And what we're seeing the Russians do to speed up their campaign is revert to their more traditional way of fighting, which is mass combat power and mass firepower. And we're seeing that will have a terrible toll on civilians in Ukraine.
And what does that mean? What do those phrases mean if you translate it into the size of the weaponry they use, the types of weapons they use in those urban environments?
Well, it means they're going to use brute force to roll over Ukrainian defenders and the inhabitants of these cities. They'll be using large calibre artillery, multiple launch rocket systems, other large rockets, and dumb bombs dropped from aircraft and dumb rockets fired from helicopters. Most of these are not precision and they are not discriminate.
So they're just going to land, wherever they might and rely purely on their explosive power to do the rest. So with that is obviously going to carry more destruction to the built environment than we've seen so far. Most of it seems to have been, I won't use the word targeted, but narrow in its scope. We
are approaching a much more brutal and destructive and bloody phase of the war. At least 4 of the Ukrainian cities are encircled by the Russians. They are conducting frontal assaults on Kharkiv, which is resulting in major casualties on both sides. And they're trying to encircle Kiev whilst also terrorising the residents with artillery and rocket strikes in the city. And the Ukrainians, what is good or strong about their defensive capabilities against those sorts of attacks in the kinds of environments that we're talking about? Well, first and foremost, the Ukrainians have great purpose. They are defending their homeland. They're fighting for their freedom. And that really does steel the heart of both soldiers and civilians. They're also getting a lot of support from the West. Now, whether that will tell in the end against a massive Russian conventional force, we will see. But we know there will be a step up in destruction and bloodshed. This support you speak of from the West is weaponry, right? I mean, is there anything else going on that we don't know about? There's been so much discussion about NATO's refusal, America's refusal to go in. Are you purely talking about weapons support? Oh, I think there's much more. There's a lot of non-lethal aid as well, assistance, humanitarian assistance, the international sanctions, the UN has obviously been active. We're really seeing an international arsenal of democracy being mobilised very quickly to support the Ukrainians. We are, but is it making any difference? It doesn't. Against the forecast that you and others are making of a new and more violent phase, is it deterring anything? Oh, I think it makes a big difference. If you're a soldier on the ground and you know you have people not just in your own country supporting you, but overseas, that does make a measurable difference. They are getting in missiles, for anti-tank missiles, anti-aircraft missiles. They will also make a difference. I expect eventually the size and the firepower of the Russians to tell, but the Ukrainians are going to continue to fight on. Yep. We did hear today that Australia is joining a growing group, but at last count about 39 nation states seeking a war crimes investigation against Russia. At face value, would they be on solid ground there? Oh, I think so. When you see the Russians targeting the centre of cities with artillery, it's indiscriminate. The laws of armed conflict are very clear around indiscriminate targeting and targeting of civilians, so I think they're on very firm ground.
And how long, these take typically a very long time to accumulate the evidence and or bring the other party to justice. I think we've seen that around MH17, and well, it wasn't a war crime, I guess, but anything that's brought through this court takes a while, right, to amass the evidence.
It does, but we should never let war criminals off, no matter the length of time it takes, as we did with the Nazis. Sometimes that took decades. This will be exactly the same. If you commit a war crime, we'll never stop chasing you. That should be the message sent to the Russians.
Now, just finally, Mick, question without notice, but this issue that's been around in Australia all week about the possibility of people wanting to go from Australia to Ukraine, possibly also join Russian forces, but particularly answer the call to arms by Ukraine. Are we any clearer on whether that would or wouldn't breach a law? What do we know about this fighting unit that President of Ukraine is trying to stand up?
Well, for Australians to go overseas and fight for lawfully constituted military organisations, I think you're probably getting advice there from the Attorney General or the Commissioner of the Federal Police. But if it's a lawfully constituted military organisation that is under the control of the President of the Ukraine, I mean, it will fight under the jurisdiction and the same laws that any other lawfully constituted military organisation would.
Yep, well, I think we're going to put more questions on that to people in the government who are clearly trying to deter people from doing it, but its legal status, as you say, is incredibly complicated. Mick Ryan, no doubt we'll hear from you again before all of this bloody battle is over. Retired Army General Mick Ryan joining us here in the studio today.